Okay, wonderful. Hi, everybody online and in the room again, and welcome to the 2025 launch of Issued Stories of Service. We are a journal for active duty veterans and military families, sponsored by the Office of Veteran and Military Engagement at ASU. Yes, Wanda Wright, our fearless director over there. Don't worry, I'll be thanking you guys again at the end, because this would not be possible without their support, obviously. And for those of you who don't know what we do, we're a literary journal that publishes poetry, short fiction, and short creative nonfiction. But we also profile, so that's essentially interview, veterans who are doing extraordinary work in their veteran communities. So we've got some poets here tonight, we've got some fiction writers here tonight, and we've also got some of our profile subjects here tonight who are going to say a little bit about their organizations and a little bit about the fearless work that they do in their own veteran communities. So an honor to have all of you with us tonight, audience members and those of you who were published in the journal. I am the founding faculty editor of Issued, Dr. Rosemary Dombrowski. I go by RD, so just like anyone who's been in the military, I have a nickname that I prefer to my actual name. I'm USMC by default. I'm the daughter of a combat veteran, sister of a Marine as well, so this was a natural fit for me and kind of allowed me to reconnect with my own military history. So it's been a joy and an honor to do this work for 3 years. And because I know they're watching, even if they weren't watching, I would be giving them a shout out. I could not have done any of this work without our founding student editor, Virgil Connor, who graduated from ASU last year. That's why they're not here tonight, because they moved back to Beaver Island in the middle of Lake Michigan. So we hope you're not getting an ice storm tonight. We hope that you're tuning in, Virgil. Obviously, when I got the fellowship with OVMAE and we talked about starting this journal, I knew that I was going to need a student with me who could handle the workload. Virgil majored in creative writing and also happened to be a veteran of the United States Air Force. So it was a perfect fit. I called them up and I said, man, have I got a job for you, and I hope you're ready. So Virgil's been with me from the beginning. We wouldn't be here tonight without Virgil's amazing leadership. So thank you so much, Virgil. We love you. And just to give you a quick review of what we've been doing for the last 3 years, since our inaugural launch in May 2023, Issued has been featured across several media platforms, including ABC 15, KJZZ, which is our local NPR station, ASU News, and Higher Ed Military. We've hosted readings in Phoenix and LA, as well as virtual events attended by veterans across the country. We are extremely proud of the growth that we've seen over the last 3 years. But I think more than anything, this editorial team is proud of the invisible work that we do, because we believe that every time a veteran picks up a copy of that journal, every time they log onto our website, we might be inspiring them to use poetry and narrative as a means of telling their stories, which can be a truly healing act. So we love the fact that we might be doing that invisible work year-round. With that, I'm going to introduce the rest of the editorial team, because none of this would be possible without them. If you've never been at the helm of a publication, I'm here to tell you that Virgil and I could not do this by ourselves. Despite our expertise, it is way too much work. So my team comes together in the beginning of January. We meet every Friday for 3 hours, and we have 12 weeks to put this together. So this is an extraordinary group of ASU students, and I'm going to introduce them all individually so that you can clap for them individually. First, I'm going to introduce our graduate editor, Lexi Haladic. She's back for her second year. Invaluable. Let's give her a round of applause. Next is Sophia Gubka. She was one of our new editors this year. She graduated, or will be graduating in a week, but we're hoping to rope her back in next year. Sophia. Next, we've got Fabian Sandez, also a returning editor, and he might be back next year for year number 3. Fabian Sandez. Thank you, man. And finally, Paige Danes. She's one of our new editors and only a sophomore, so I think I've got her for 2 more years. Paige Danes, everybody. Amazing team, amazing. Their passion, their dedication, their hard work is what makes the journal possible. I could not do it by myself. I have a million other things on my plate. So they keep me on task. Those meetings every Friday that are 3 hours long are when we sort of pool our collective resources and get most of the work done. So again, you'd have nothing without this team. Amazing. I would have nothing without this team as well. And the print version in particular, if any of you are holding it, would not exist without what we call a design editor. Nobody on the editorial team can actually turn this manuscript into a book. We had to bring somebody in from journalism who had a background in producing magazines to do that. And that would be my former student, also graduating in 2 weeks, Savannah Rose DeGupion. And her work is what made the print journal possible, and it looks beautiful. Thank you for hanging with this crazy team, Savannah. We know that we can be difficult to work with, so we love you for accepting us for who we are. And thank you again, everybody, for coming. We're going to start the program now, and it is such an honor to have our cover artist with us here tonight. He goes by Doc, but his name is Kerry Pardue, and the painting is entitled Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder, Putting Back the Pieces of My Life. Kerry Doc Pardue is an author and poet who served as a medic in Vietnam, and he actually submitted this painting to the OVMAE art show this year. We loved it so much that we wanted to use it for our cover, and he graciously agreed. So here's Doc, everybody. He's going to talk a little bit about his painting.
Thank you so much. My voice is not sounding very well. I'm going to have surgery on Wednesday on my vocal cords. So I'm looking forward to that, to straighten out the voice. This year medically has not been a good year for me. I'm dealing with a lot of issues with Agent Orange. I'm no longer having the struggle I had with PTSD, like I did when I was over there in 68, 69. But it took a long time for me to figure out what was going on. Matter of fact, I went to the VA 3 times, 1969, 1974, and 1979. They told me, there's nothing we can do for you. So they sent me away. Now, what that had resulted in, the 3 million men and women who served in Vietnam, over 100,000 Vietnam veterans have committed suicide since coming home because of the VA not doing what they didn't know what to do. I'm not going to blame the VA. What I'm going to say is they were not educated enough, but they have turned themselves around a great deal. And I applaud their efforts to help the veterans deal with not only PTSD, but also dealing with sexual trauma, who also have to deal with breakups, divorces, loss of kids, substance abuse. They have a whole gamut, a menu of things that people can get help. And all you have to do is just go over there and ask, and they can help. Now, I've been asked to limit my talk to the painting. I want to tell you about my homecoming from Vietnam. March 23rd, 1969, I left Vietnam. And I was on a plane full of guys who was, I think, Eastern Airlines. It was so quiet when we took off. When they said we were out of Vietnam airspace, the plane just exploded in hoorays and hurrah, and I'm going home. We landed at probably the worst airport we could land in, Oakland, California. In 1969, it was the height of the anti-war demonstrations. I was met by 4 different groups. I was called a baby killer. I was spat on. I had a plastic bag of blood thrown out of my uniform. And needless to say, I was heartbroken. I mean, I was a medic. I mean, I helped take care of people. Not only our people, but their people that we wounded. So I went to my gate and I sat down and it came all around me again. Thank goodness the person at the desk saw what was happening and I was in tears. I was crying like a baby. I was so upset. And I didn't know how to respond. I didn't want to swing at anybody or hit anybody. I just wanted to be able to left alone. She came over to me, she said, follow me. She put me on a plane in first class. Said, this is your seat until we get to Chicago. And don't let anybody bother you. So I got 2 steaks. My glass never was empty. And that was the best part of my homecoming, coming home. Oakland was awful. I hope they don't go through that, send veterans home that way again. It's different now. They're sending veterans home as a group, as all together. The ones who went over together come home together. And we were individual replacements. This painting came about because I kept wondering where the rest of my pieces were. I was not the same person that, when I came home, I was not the same person that went over to Vietnam. Matter of fact, I didn't think I was ever going to come home. I didn't think I was going to make it to 20, but I have made it to 78, and I'm doing pretty damn good, okay? It's not that I didn't have thoughts of harming myself. My relationships were broken many times with family members, my parents, my brothers and sisters, and my children. I have 2 children that will not talk to me. Okay? They're in their 50s. But that's something I deal with. It's one of my pieces that is still missing. But each of these pieces that I painted, it was a painting that I did because I thought about, how do I get back to normal or some semblance of normal? So I got the idea of painting a soldier with pieces missing. And he was trying to put his life back together, much like I had done over the last 57, 58 years. I have kind of really put all my pieces together except for a couple of pieces. But I do have 2 paintings I'm going to sell. If you're interested, I have a 11 by 14 and I have a 16 by 20. If you're interested to see me afterwards, you're not obligated to do anything. If you want to bypass it, that's fine. It's just my commercial. That's how I earn money. So the bigger one is normally 150. I'm going to sell it for 100. The smaller one is normally 125, and now I'm going to sell that one for 75. So just see me afterwards. I also bought my newest book, Rice Patty Stew and Saigon Tea. I don't know why I come up with those kind of names, but my first book was called Poems and the Keys of Life, Reflections of a Combat Medic. Now, I've written about 150 poems about being a medic in Vietnam and about other people who served in the military. I just wanted to get a perspective out there of what people go through, whether they served in Afghanistan, Iraq, Bosnia, Vietnam, Germany, Korea, World War II. I've had World War II vets write me letters and say thank you. I never knew what was happening to me. And your book helped me a great deal. So I'm a very good friend with Gary Sinise. I was his parents' paper boy when I was in 5th grade. I was 8 years old. I was home in 1955. He came home from the hospital, and I never thought he would ever become who he became. But Lieutenant Dan was his role in the movie Forrest Gump. And there's another relationship I have with Gary in that the movie Forrest Gump featured a unit called the 2nd of the 47th Infantry, 9th Infantry Division. That was my unit in Vietnam. Unbelievable. So we made Gary an honorary member of our battalion. And I was chosen because I had a relationship as his paper boy. And that's the only time I ever met him, when he came home from the hospital. So they said, you're selected. What is you can do it? So I went down to meet him and gave him a plaque and gave him a copy of my first book. Gary called me up after he read the book and said, it's totally amazing. He says, I'm going to use some of this in different things I do. He said, I work with the children of lost, who the parents were lost in service. I work with the wounded. I help build homes. And these are all things that I do. Gary recently moved last year from LA to Nashville. And last year, his oldest son died of cancer. So Mac is the child's name. So I've been down to Gary's house a couple of times. He's been to my house a couple of times, and he's talking about making music albums that his son has written of music that he wrote and going to put it to music. So I love Gary Sinise. I hope he becomes known as this generation's Bob Hope. Not taking anything away from Bob Hope. Bob Hope, we'll never have another Bob Hope. The time he spent away from family and friends to be with us. I did get to see him in Vietnam. One of the greatest shows I ever saw. Anne Margaret, oh, she was so hot. But a little bit about PTSD, and I don't know how much time you're going to give me. But let me just tell you a little bit about my PTSD. I buried myself in work. I went to college full-time, 12 hours a week, and I worked 40 hours a week. I was a police officer. Now, I could not indulge in alcohol because of being a cop. I couldn't be a drunk. I didn't mess with medications because I knew better as a medic. I didn't use illicit drugs because I never knew anything about them. I saw guys use it in Vietnam, but I said, I'm not going to do that. Are you crazy? But I did medicate myself with food. Now today I weigh 168 pounds. I used to weigh 425 pounds. I medicated myself with food. And I medicated myself by burying myself into work. I have since backed off everything. The only thing I do now is things like this. And I do a creative writing class for a organization called Recovery Cafe. It's for those recovering from alcohol and substance abuse. So it's my way of giving back and helping them write their stories. It's for their recovery. Help them get back to their families to rebuild that bridge that they have burnt. So I'm going to read one poem and I'll be done. I have a great deal of respect for the women who served. Some 12,000 nurses served in Vietnam. Some of the most remarkable women I have ever seen in action work that try to save lives of people wounded, people that I sent. This one is entitled, She Ain't Just a Second Lieutenant. Let me find it again, I'm sorry. Anybody know what a second lieutenant is? Sometimes they're called butterball lieutenants. They go through the 90-day OCS program. These guys have a lot to learn, but their NCOs will teach them. And one quick story, this 90-day wonder second lieutenant got sent to Vietnam, attached to my unit. And my job was that day, I had 3 days left in country, was to burn the ship. Pull the buckets out underneath the building, you put gasoline and diesel fuel, light it, and let it burn up. So he came outside and he said, "You better hurry up, boy." I said, "Sir, who are you going, boy? I ain't your boy." He made me so mad that I put the barrels back in, let him, this was the officers' latrine. I let him, the building caught on fire. Man, that was a sight to see. It was beautiful. Didn't smell too good, but you know what? I got so much satisfaction in burning down that officer's latrine. He comes running out and says, "What am I supposed to do now?" I said, "Sir, you're a lieutenant. You can figure it out." So I'm going to end with this here. She ain't just a second lieutenant. These women were so incredible. I call them the closet vets because a lot of them don't want to admit they were serving in Vietnam. It's so painful for a lot of them still. Not sure where she called home. She stayed pretty much alone. The job was tough, long, and hard. She made it look easy, setting her emotions aside. She worked on the boys from back home. When she arrived, she was easygoing and soft. War changes people and brings out their best and their worst. She would not give up on the dying boys. She would order them not to die. Some fought to listen and not give up. And I came home walking instead of a bag. Second lieutenant, I swear at the end of her tour, knew exactly what to do. She would work with the head wounds and the blind. She was their sister, their moms, and their wives. Sitting and talking to them and trying to help them find their way. But nobody knew at the end of her shift, she would just go back to her room and cry. In the opening of the job, she was calm and positive. No one knew the pain she buried deep inside. 45 years later, she still lives alone at her home. She remembers, and she still cries. But she never became anybody else's sister, mom, or wife. I lost too many brothers, was a widow time and time again. My sons died, PTSD, and Agent Orange is killing all the rest. Don't you know who I am? I ain't just second lieutenant, not just Army North Corps. I am your sister, your mom, and your wife. Damn it, I order you to live.
Let's give it up for Doc, everybody. What a beautiful story. Thank you for everything you do for veterans. Love this community. It gives back so, so much. Our next reader is Jennie Blair, and the title of her piece is The Work of Tortoises. I will introduce you as you're walking up, Jennie. Jennie is the Director of Enrollment Services for ASU's Downtown Phoenix, West Valley, and Polytechnic campus, as well as the ASU California Center in Los Angeles. So she's basically the Director of Enrollment Services for every campus we have except the Tempe campus, which is how I should have said it. Her husband, Jack, served in the Navy and the Army Reserves. He's a podcaster and a filmmaker, and he's live streaming us tonight. Thank you again, Jack Blair, and let's give it up for his wife, Jennie Blair.
So I stand here representing a military spouse experience. So my work is called The Work of Tortoises. Today we moved our son's tortoise outside from a small glass enclosure that we had been keeping in his room. I hadn't realized how knotted Leo the tortoise's shell had become. He had grown without me not noticing, because he had been hiding away in shadows and those little tortoise cubbies that you buy at PetSmart. My only glance as I tossed collard greens inside his habitat was to ensure proof of life. At first, when we took him outside of his enclosure for relocation, he looked distorted to me, and I felt badly for him, my stomach nodding a little bit. Then I realized he was just growing. He was doing what he was supposed to do, and he hadn't needed me to be watchful over him. He went from a super small enclosure to a giant garden bed in our backyard, full of lush plants and extra dirt for burrowing and traversing. We had a camera on him to track his movements because he was my little guy and this was his first night out of the house. Silly, I know. When I checked on him in the middle of the night, he had scooted over to the far side of the corner, even though there was so much space for him to walk around. I guess sometimes when you grow, you're not sure what to do with the new space. And in a lot of ways, that reminds me of how my husband came home from the war. His shell was harder, and I felt sorry for him because he looked distorted and he had grown, but he wasn't used to all this new space. He stayed in his corner for a long time, and I finally learned not to keep checking in on him, just like I was still checking up on Leo the tortoise. You just have to let people stay in their corner as long as they need to and just remind them that you'll be there when they start to venture out again. Growth happens without my vigilant attention. Here's what I'll say about tortoises. The work of tortoises is never done. They carry the weight of existence, each step a testament to resilience. Tortoises can't leave their shells, and we cannot leave our stories. Our stories are both identity and armor. The work of tortoises, much like our own, unfolds in the quiet persistence of time, and it's never done. It unfolds slowly in our time, and it's okay to be slow.
What a beautiful analogy. All of the editors loved that piece so much. I hope everybody here did as well. Thank you again, Jennie. What a great contribution. Our next reader is Chuck Hale, and his poem is entitled The Panic Button. Chuck is a USMC veteran who served 7 years as an infantryman with multiple deployments. He now works at ASU in the College of Health Solutions in conjunction with the Military and Veteran Resilience and Health Collaborative. Let's give it up for Chuck Hale, everybody.
Wow. Thank you. I've been to all three of these events now. Not one time did I ever think that I would be standing here. And for one, writing something. I think I was at an event at Songbird over Salute to Service last year. I read a letter that I wrote to my mother. And during that time, I heard a service member say, "Oh, this is my first poem I've ever written. I'm scared shitless." And I was like, "Oh, wow. This is for, I think maybe I can do that." And I already know the title. And unfortunately, the title is kind of the story of my life. I mean, the title is the title of a poem, but it's also the title of my life. I mean, I could probably use that as my middle name and come marching out to some blaring song, but my family knows that the panic button's around all the time. And those of you that are familiar with military terminology, I'm more like det cord and not like time fuse. And if you know what time fuse is, you can cut it before it hits. Det cord, you can't. Once the ignition happens, it's gone. You have no, it's, the destruction's there. I love this. I love the piece, the post-traumatic stress disorder. I'm gonna throw out a Mattis quote, General Mattis, and for most of you that know General Mattis, you'll be like, "Oh shit, Chuck's gonna say one of his quotes." No, it's not. It's not that, but it's directly along the lines of post-traumatic stress. And I think what I've learned about myself is I've got to find the things that connect with me. I'm not gonna get past this this broken persona of this post-traumatic stress disorder unless I find ways to heal myself and grow. And that's where I really find post-traumatic stress growth, something that I'm trying to believe in. I'm trying to learn. I'm always trying to heal. It's a work in progress. If you've ever built a jigsaw puzzle, it takes forever. And I don't think it's ever done because you're always missing one piece and you can never find it. So anyway, put on some glasses here. But General Mattis, there's also something called post-traumatic growth. You come out of a situation like that and you actually feel kinder towards your fellow man, fellow woman, that you're actually a better husband, father, and you're actually have a closer relationship with your God. He continues, for whatever trauma came with service, in tough circumstances, we should take what we've learned, take our post-traumatic growth, and like past generations coming home, bring our sharpened strengths to bear, bring our attitude of gratitude to bear. So I think, with this opportunity and I don't know, just trying to do this, the panic button, when I was sitting there at Songbird, I know the title. And it's about the poem's about me at one of my bottom points in life. And unfortunately, the VA didn't help with that. I always felt like these appointments that I would go to with the VA, you would see somebody with mental health, and then you would go see somebody with, your back problems, and then you'd see somebody else here, and there was never any alignment with what your care. It was just a business transaction with one individual, and then you move on. Well, I was struggling, and my mother was there for me as she always has been, and she took care of me, and she took me to this VA appointment where my middle name was hit, the panic button. I trust you give me the care I rate, to honor the oath to advocate. Without debate, I follow your lead. A Marine, a bit broken, but built to succeed. Take this, not that, he says of the scripts. See you next week. This will all work out great. I struggle to live, lean on my mom. She takes me to the VA. My hands shake. Do you feel normal? The doctor asks. Sleep deprived, I scoffed. I eat seeds. Agitator rises, anxiety flares. Heart pounds. No lifeline, no care. Wait, who prescribed that? Wait, say again. No time to listen, just empty words. What the fuck do you mean? I snap. Code blue, lights flash. Code blue, lights flash. Not one, not two, but three security in the fray. Stay for your safety, they sternly say. I jump from my seat. From who? From me? From you? I react without care, without thought or care. Oh man, Mom, she's behind me now. Tears in her eyes. She pulls me back. I freeze. I breathe, I break. Go see the advocate. I deserve better. We all do. Thank you.
Should I tell the real story behind the I kind of want to now. Chuck's been the greatest colleague, the greatest supporter for the past 3 years. And after my veteran storytelling event, he sent me that poem. He said, I just wanted to show it to you. Like, I was inspired to write this. He comes to my Verses for Vets program at ASU as well. And I know that he just wanted me to read the poem so I could say, Chuck, this is beautiful. What a great job. And I said, can I show the editors? Can we publish this if we all like it? So I am so, so proud of you for not just showing it to me, but agreeing to let all of the editors read it and then sharing it with the whole community, Chuck, because that's important. That's a story that resonates with a lot of people. So thank you again. Lea Seago, she has been published and issued 2 years running, and this is the first time she has graced us with her storytelling presence. She's got a great story to tell us today. It's a work of nonfiction called Circle of Experience. Anna served in the U.S. Army for 7 years and 13 years in the reserves, and this story is really going to cover her battle to get in, not to get out. Get up here, Anna. So happy to have you with us this year.
I learned very early that you have to have a sense of humor to be in the U.S. Army. If you can't take a joke and you can't enjoy yourself, you shouldn't do it. He was sitting at a desk in full Army uniform, all alone. The Dayton recruiting station was empty except for the one lone staff sergeant recruiter. He looked up and asked if he could help me. I replied, I want to join the Army. He then quipped, what did you have in mind? Boldly, I said, my first choice is to drive Jeeps for general officers in the Presidio. I thought that was a real significant thing to do. Expressionless, he said, I need more information. Your full name, birth date, marital status, husband's name, all the stuff. With a deadpan face, he just wrote all of my answers down on the information card. All of a sudden, he exclaimed, husband's an Air Force pilot, one son, interior designer, and college instructor. If I turn this card in, I will lose my job. You are mental. He asked where I came from and who drove me there. He thought I really was from some hospital helping me. I got to my feet and I hastily left the station. As I looked over my shoulder before closing the door, there remained in the station one lone recruiter just sitting by himself, just looking ahead. My husband was waiting in the car. He thought that if a woman joined the Army, it would knock the square corners off, whatever that means. So he thought it was a good idea, even though he was Air Force. Anyway, I said to him, "You will never believe what happened." Then I explained what just happened with the lone recruiter. He turned to me and said, "I never liked the ARMY." Okay. So I continued my civilian employment as an interior designer and college instructor. I called a client and told her that I'd be seeing her on Saturday. And she said, "Well, I'm not available because I have to go to an Army meeting." And I said, "Well, you can afford to pay me to come see you and you can go to the Army meeting?" She said, "Oh, yes." Well, then I told her my story. And she says, "I'm going to tell my colonel when I see him on Saturday." I talked to him and he said, "I don't have a position for you because in the reserve, you have to have a position in order for us to recruit you, but I will help you." This physical was scheduled for the following week. I arrived to find I was only the female in the room. We were enlisted as Women's Army Corps at the time and were not readily encouraged to join anything. Segregation of men and women was the norm in nearly every aspect of service. I joined the line of men. The sergeant came into the room and yelled, "Men, take off your shirts and line up." My internal dialogue was, yikes. Was this the beginning and the end of my Army career? I stepped into line with my shirt intact and just waited with the men. When it was my turn, the sergeant, a little flustered, said, "You are different. Stay behind." Son of a gun. The doctor gave me the physical in a separate room. At that time, he asked me if I was a motorcycle rider. I told him no, I was accident prone and a tomboy when I was growing up. He certainly said, "You have the scars to prove it." Then came the lab tests. Again, we were instructed to line up. All of a sudden, a male voice protested very loudly, "My name is not Anna." He had mistakenly received my lab test results. This was worked out and he was calmed down. I no longer had a low profile for the rest of the testing day because everybody knew who I was and what was going on. Now the names were called for testing. Everyone who passed the physical was now to take the written tests. When time was up and we were all finished, a somber sergeant and civilian came to me and said, "You failed the test." More embarrassment. In front of all the men who passed, they said, "You failed the test." My friends in school were recruited because their number was picked and they had to go. I didn't know that someone that volunteered had to go through all this stuff in order to get there. Well, here I go. The next question was, "Did you drive here? You should not be operating an automobile." I sat in my seat just really stunned. I had never in my life failed a test. Now I had 2 failures. The recruiter would not recruit me, and the mental test was not a go. Oh my. Finally, the grim sergeant came into the room and came back to me and said, "Sorry, we used the male key on your female test. We used the same key for everyone in the room." He forgot I was different. Anyway, he rescinded all of my test scores that said I failed, and I passed. What am I thinking? Recruiter rejection, lab test mix up, test scores mixed up. This is the preface to my Army enlistment? Really? What was I thinking? I was thinking all I want to do is drive Army Jeeps. Fort McClellan, April 1975. We rolled out of a bus from the airport ready for WAC Basic. I was told it would be a piece of cake, mostly classroom and a bit of marching. Ha, untruth. A big fat sergeant yelled, "Ladies, pick up your baggage and load this here truck." This here truck was a beautiful 2.5 ton called the Deuce. We loaded the truck and climbed in the back and were off to be processed in. Well, when we went in the building, there were shelves just filled with uniforms, and this old lady was standing there. When it came to my turn, she shoved my issue at me and said brusquely, "Next." Being older, I thought I should have had the chance to tell her my size. But it was at this point that I realized that what I had to say was immaterial, at least for the weeks at Fort McClellan. She did not care about me or my size and how I would look. Her job was to issue the appropriate uniforms, correct number of items, correct size with just a glance. Wow, the experience of receiving my issue was eye-opening. The uniforms were indeed a perfect fit, with only a couple of minor tucks. I decided that Army people must be good. She extolled the excellence that would be required in my Army time. From that moment on, we were given no time to remember who we were, what we were made of. There was not time to pick and choose. That was done already. This was the Army, Miss Lee. Now that we thought we had our basic under control, an announcement was made. The WAC trainees were going to be watched by high-ranking women. We were to prove we could master the skills that men did so we could be part of the one Army concept. To top it off, we were assigned a male drill sergeant to help us develop Army skills. As you can imagine, he was overjoyed about this. Really. Sergeant Turner, good-looking guy. Never saw his face, basically, because when we were marching, he turned his back. He couldn't face us. He said we could not absolutely march properly, and he was not going to watch. So here he was calling cadence, not even knowing what we were doing, because he couldn't stand it. Graduation came and went, and it was bus time. I was headed back to the airport. I was recruited. I passed the physical. I passed the written test. I could march even double time since I was the shortest and the oldest at age 34. I could do left face, right face, and about face with no brig time. All I needed was a dolly to wheel me to the plane. So the after comment I'm going to make is that a few years later, I was still a recruiter. I loved recruiting. And when I went into the room in El Paso, Texas at this meeting, this sergeant was in the room, staff sergeant. He was a staff sergeant when he wouldn't recruit me, and he was a staff sergeant in the room. I was a sergeant first class. I went up to him and said, "Do you remember me?" And he went, "Oh." That's it.
I love you, Annalee. That was beautiful. It was fantastic. Annalee, you're one of my heroes. Thanks for coming and sharing that story with us today. That's a great one. Bob Beard is our next speaker, another wonderful colleague of mine who runs the Veterans Imagination Project at ASU. He is a Marine Corps veteran who leads the Veterans Imagination Project at ASU's Center for Science and the Imagination, and he might have grown up in Apache Junction. Bob Beard, get up here.
Yeah, so thank you. Like Chuck, I've attended a handful of these events, and I'm just so inspired by what RD and the editors of Issue do to bring sort of narrative to life for healing. And so the project that I work on, which is called the Veterans Imagination Project, is another way to use narrative to serve our veterans in transition, right? And so futures thinking and speculative storytelling, also a big fancy word for science fiction. So are there any science fiction fans in the room? I mean, we are standing on hollow ground, right? This is May the 4th. So May the 4th be with you. And also with me. Thank you. Yes. Well done. So
I was laughing. I knew I saw you laugh. Sparky didn't laugh.
So we're talking about science fiction, and we're talking about science fiction for military transition. And, you know, those of us who have gone through military transition, we know how hard that is, right? And so military transition, about 200,000, maybe a little bit over, people separate from military service and enter the civilian workforce every year. 200,000 people. That is a big number, right? Per year, right? Let me give you just a little bit, you know, maybe we can boil it down just a little bit. It's Mountain America Stadium, you know, Sun Devil Stadium. That's filling that 4 times. 4 times per year, people coming back from the military. That's a big number to think about too. So let me just boil it down to 1. So that's me, Corporal Beard, RJ, babyface. And this is me. This is me now, hanging with Sparky. Definitely a few more wrinkles, a lot more hair. But really, what I want to talk about is this gap right here. You know, how I got from here to there, like that in 1999 when I got out of the military. That was unimaginable. Like, how was I going to learn to thrive in the civilian workforce? So it's often said that military transition can be a culture shock. And I think it actually goes a little bit deeper than that. And so this is a book by Alvin Toffler. Toffler was a sociologist in the 1960s. In the 1970s, he wrote a best-selling book called Future Shock. And what he said is, future shock is the shattering stress and disorientation that we induce in individuals by subjecting them to too much change in too short a time, right? And so this is the 1960s, right? You know, like, people were launching rockets, right? Like every few months, right? And, you know, plastic was a space age polymer, a wave of the future, right? So these things were like big changes that were happening. But again, 200,000 people per year are going from a very, you know, a very organized and very purposeful and intentional space, and then going out into the civilian world and encountering too much change in too short a time. So my colleagues and I at the Center for Science and Imagination work on mitigating future shock, right? So we do this through applied science fiction, collaborative imagination, but we're not the only ones, right? We use science fiction as a way to help mitigate this future shock. And it's of paramount importance to organizations all around the world. Some people call it strategic foresight. Some people call it business intelligence, but it helps people rehearse for the change that is happening. So, you know, for the futures that are going to come to pass or might come to pass, and telling stories about the future. And so we're not the only ones that do it here at ASU. NASA does this work. The Smithsonian does this work. City of Phoenix does this work. This is a issue from Phoenix Magazine from a couple years ago. And perhaps not surprisingly, the US military does this work. This US military tells stories about the future. There's actually a journal from the Marine Corps Futures Command. And they said the intent is that a lance corporal or a second lieutenant reading or writing these stories will have described an operating environment that will no longer be new to them when they advance in rank later in their careers. So my question to you is that if we can do this for Fortune 500 companies, and if we're investing in our nation's infrastructure, right? NASA and the Smithsonian, right? And we're teaching these organizations to tell stories about the future. Why aren't we doing it with the 200,000 neighbors that are entering our communities every year? Too much change in too short an amount of time. An operating environment that is no longer new to them. So can we use the tools of science fiction storytelling to help our warfighters when they come home? Because that gap is real, right? Doc's art, that jigsaw puzzle, right? When you get out of the military, it's not just a job change or a relocation, right? It's actually this complex process of personal and psychological change, right? And so that jigsaw puzzle image is very apropos, because when we're so, concerned with navigating all the pieces of transition, it's like a 5,000 piece jigsaw puzzle that we have to figure out before our benefits run out, right? Before we, can move on to the next stage of our lives. It's like somebody threw this giant jigsaw puzzle at us, right? And we're trying to pick up all these pieces. And we're attending to like the really important stuff. But if we're not attending to the personal, right? And the psychological, right? If we're not attending to that, then we're doing our service members a huge disservice. And so what we do with this project is we really lean into this idea of science fiction, right? And so previous research on transition talks about how people feel alienated. They say it really is such a different world. It's very, very hard to adjust to the actual, like the real world, or it's surreal. It's like landing on Mars. One person said, when I came back, I couldn't deal with the gray area that's neither black nor white. And somebody said, if anything, I feel like a stranger in a strange land. So this is science fiction, right? We all know these stories, right? All of you who raised your hands and said, may the 4th be with you, right? Like, we love these stories. And why do we like these stories? Why does science fiction work so well? Because it's about the adjacent possible. It's about a world that's, sort of recognizable. We have to learn the rules of this new world, right? And we have to step into this operating environment that we don't quite recognize. And maybe if we're lucky, we meet a mentor, right? We meet an Obi-Wan Kenobi. We meet a Doc Brown from Back to the Future. And they help us sort of get oriented to this world, right? And then we start to understand the way that the rules of this world work. And then we can use our unique perspectives, right? And our view of the world to change it, right? And to start thriving in that world. That's what science fiction does, right? So again, can we use these same tools that we use for NASA and the Smithsonian and that the US military already teaches its warfighters? Can we use this for the 200,000 people that are re-entering our communities every year? So we do that with our Veterans Imagination Project. And what we do is we pair them with mentors. We find them an Obi-Wan Kenobi, right? We show them the way that the world might be and how they can intercept that world when and if that world breaks the way that we think it will. And then we pair them with a concept artist, and that concept artist helps them distill their research and their investigations and their curiosity into a piece of art that features them in the future and them playing a role center stage, right? And so here's an example of one of our participants who is using AI as a way to coordinate social services. Here's another one that is using like implanted devices like Neuralink and updating cybersecurity. So it's like going to the dentist's office and the Apple Genius Bar, right? So, and here's a person that's using vacant office space to turn into vertical gardens, and so on and so forth. And what we're more concerned about here, we're not concerned about, are we actually predicting the future? Are we getting it right? We're concerned that they're using their imaginations to think differently about themselves, right? And what we've seen through this is that they're building a new narrative identity, a new coherent identity that is independent of who they are as a veteran. And so this is my favorite fact from all of this research, is that by doing this storytelling, right, by creating narratives of post-service success and pairing them with pieces of art and having something that these folks can sort of lean into, we're actually activating parts of their brain that are responsible not just for behavior change, but for making memories. And so what we're doing is we're making memories of things that haven't happened yet, which is just incredible. I get goosebumps every time I say it. It's so cool. So, but lastly, this doesn't mean anything if we're just, creating pictures and telling stories and then putting them in our pockets and going somewhere else, right? what we do is we build these futures together. So we tell these stories, we share this art, and we share it with members of the community. And we bring members of the community to hear these stories of our veterans, because now it's not just veterans who served, right, and doing things that we as civilian members can't imagine. Now we're involved in making their futures happen. So we're seeing them as agents of a better future. I'm going to end on this because what I think is so important about this work is that we tell our veterans when they start, we say, the future could be anything you want it to be. And we'll go back to some of these images. So we could have images of veterans like being filthy rich and like being like Scrooge McDuck and just jumping in a big vault of money and just swimming around in it. But each one of these people, to a person, has created images and stories about them making their communities better. Veterans are people of service, but that service doesn't end once their service is over, right? So if we can all get on the same page with these stories about the future, and we can enable our veterans to tell these stories and believe in these stories, they can lead us into a better future and a brighter tomorrow. Thanks so much.
Is Bob Beard just the coolest? I mean, if you were interested in anything he was saying, please read the profile of the Veterans Imagination Project in this year's journal. Let's give it up for Bob Beard. My favorite thing is when the semester ends, I get to go geek out with the guys at the Center for Science and Imagination, get to go have tea with them. I love it. All right. Our next reader is another returning author and one of my favorites, John M. Johnson. He'll be reading a poem entitled Thank You for Your Service. John M. Johnson served in the U.S. Navy during 2 tours of Vietnam from 1964 to 67. He was a professor of justice studies for 40 years at ASU, and he is a member of Veterans for Peace. John Johnson, everybody.
Thank you for your service. The meaning vacillates by speaker, time, and place. The words don't reveal as much as the expression on the face. Young women seem respectful of family they rarely name, while young men speak with longing to join a new video game. Old folks are more reserved. They speak in somber tones of family or personal experience carried deeply in their bones. Fellow veterans never say this because they know only too well that we were all young upstarts eager to pave the roads to hell. You talk about the killing or the toll of human waste. Still fewer, the political decisions commonly made with impulse and haste. The war-making decisions are presented as so rational, and when tinted with fear, the interests seem so national. But the devil is in the details of the permanent war economy. So it is important to follow the money, to resist for the sake of our sanity.
John is a man of few words, but very deep wisdom. Let's give it up one more time for John M. Johnson. Thank you, John. Next up, we have an author who is visiting us from the East Coast, or at least that's where he's headed. His name is Nestor Walters, and his piece is entitled Reimagining Heroes, Thoughts on the Hero Code by Admiral McRaven. This is a piece of nonfiction that Nestor is going to be sharing with us today. He served 10 years in the US Navy, then studied math and creative writing at Stanford. He hosts the Veteran Transfer Project, an initiative to encourage veterans to pursue careers in STEM. And he's coming up with Ryder. Thanks so much for joining us, Nestor.
There's a process here. Okay, can I scoot this a little bit? I have to read from my tablet. Am I close enough to the mic? Okay. First of all, RD, thank you for that warm welcome. I am so happy to be here. Last issue had to zoom in, and it's just great to be in Arizona. Great that it lined up. I might need it. This pulled up. This is embarrassing.
Happens to the rest of us all the time.
Okay, I will take the hard copy. Oh wait, I know where I can find it. So I'm not connected to the Wi-Fi.
Hard copy.
Let's do the hard copy. Okay. And you might get tired of hearing this today, but I also have a book. And I'm mentioning it. There were a couple things that came up in the previous couple writers that resonated with me. You know, we talk about veterans struggling to come back after deployment or even after their service. Some of us don't deploy. It happens. Writer, would you please post? And I think there are two things that we struggle with. One is the alienation, and one is the lack of mission. But the alienation, I feel, is something that every single one of us struggles with. Right now, in the middle of the Pacific, is an island of plastic the size of Texas that is collecting and aggregating, and it's sitting there. Right now, as we speak, there are birds that we will batter and fry, that are living in a warehouse with 24/7 bright lights, stepping over each other's dead bodies, covered in festering sores. Then we'll put them on our plates and consider them nutrition. Right now, a 7-year-old Ghanaian boy is wielding a machete as tall as he is to cut the cocoa beans that we will put in our sweet milk chocolate. And we know all these things somewhere deep inside, and we distance ourselves from them, and we alienate ourselves from our world, from the world that we live in. And that, I believe, is our mission. We come back, we went, we defended this country. Well, now we have a whole world to think about. Now we have humanity. The decision of whether or not humanity is worth going on and will carry on is on each and every one of us. And on veterans especially, because we have already proven by our actions, could have done a lot of things, could have spent 5 years, 6 years, 10 years We had spent all that time, if you counted all the overtime, and we'd done that in any career, used car salesmen, drug dealers, we'd be rich. But we didn't. We signed a line that said, I will put my tender flesh between my country and war's desolation. And now it's that same thing, that same concept that applies and expands to every human being, every country, every person, every being in the world. If you think I'm full of crap, that's fine. If you think there's something there, that's what this book is about. A veteran, oh, speaking of which, Bob, where are you? Speculative. Visited by three spirits, Earth's past, present, and future, who help him transform from not caring to caring about the planet. And now, since I've held your captive attention for my spiel, I will read the thing I intended to read. Instance writer settled. Okay, Reimagining Heroes, thoughts on the Hero Code by Admiral McCraven, retired. Navy SEAL Admiral McCraven, beginning with a childhood in the remote Bella Woods of France, where his Air Force father was stationed, and living without television or other conveniences, was obsessed with comic books. Batman and Aquaman to Spider-Man and the Hulk, but in particular Superman, whom the renowned naval officer calls my hero, adding that there was never a towel in the house of his youth that had not, at some point, been used as a cape. All this changed when, while walking in New York City one day, the young McCraven's father noticed the boy looking up through the skyscrapers, hoping to catch a glimpse of the Man of Steel. Son, the father said, pointing to a police officer, that is the man who protects New York City. Astronauts, doctors, decorated soldiers, adventurers, sports figures, civic and political leaders, environmental visionaries, all became the young boy's new fixation. He marveled at them, but in the back of his mind, he confides to readers, he knew he was nothing like them. They were stronger, smarter, braver, and had other attributes that the future admiral and leader of the U.S. Special Forces Command believed he lacked. The experiences of a 31-year career, however, taught McCraven that there is a hero, an innate code in all of us, that has been there since the birth of mankind. It drove human expansion out of Africa, spoke truth to power, summoned explorers, nurtured the ill and infirm, and emboldened scientists and philosophers. It is these virtues he attempts to codify. That is how the Hero Code begins, and it is enough to make your faithful writer, himself a former Navy SEAL, and with his share of setbacks and failures, shed a warrior tear. If this Admiral McCraven, this soldier of soldiers, leader of leaders, who has commanded Special Operations Forces in battle, Special Operations Commands through bureaucracy, been chancellor of a state university system, and spoken to the inspiration of millions, if he can have doubted himself, and if I, a common man, still sometimes doubt myself, then perhaps there is hope for me. The code is broken into 10 virtues: courage, humility, sacrifice, integrity, compassion, perseverance, duty, hope, humor, forgiveness. Each virtue is given a short anecdote. A soldier who served bravely in the first Special Operations female engagement teams. A 19-year-old Black Marine who smothered a grenade with his body in Vietnam. A moon landing astronaut who introduced himself as having flown this and that. They each conclude with a compact and powerful assertion: I will always strive to be courageous, to take one step forward as I confront my fears. I will sacrifice a little of my time, my talent, and my treasure to those in need every day without fail. Or, I will use humor to comfort others and never be afraid to laugh at myself. Together, these form an ethos similar to that used by the SEALs, which will undoubtedly strengthen a person in their struggle to live a life more fulfilling to themselves and more compassionate to others. There are points that warrant discussion. In the Anecdote for Hope, the author, at the time a full-fledged, actively serving admiral, receives a cancer prognosis that may require him to undergo surgery and prematurely end his career. McRaven is devastated. After some struggle with this, he then visits another specialist who, thanks to new procedures, tells McRaven that he will need neither surgery nor to abandon his career, and in fact needs to make no changes to his lifestyle or habits. From this doctor, and in particular the doctor's personality, the admiral is encouraged and becomes hopeful. This could imply, however, that hope is to be derived from an improvement of the situation or its predicted outcome, rather than be something that can be fought for against all odds. A different version might center a story of a patient whose prognosis and career outlook did not change, but who still managed to carve out some version of hope regardless. Similar, but perhaps more troubling, is the Anecdote for Forgiveness. In this, the admiral visits an old Afghan whose 2 sons were accidentally killed by US troops during a Spec Ops mission. He offers the sheep and other compensation prescribed by the Quran, along with a heartfelt apology. The old father, because it is what Allah would want, accepts. While the admiral's apology is a noble gesture, it is important to remember that this old father, unless he holds some position of authority not hinted at by the book, has no alternative. The weak can never forgive. McRaven quotes from Gandhi in this very chapter. Forgiveness is the attribute of the strong. But this father has no power against the American military. There is no government, court, or legal system he can appeal to, no armored trucks, artillery, or fighter jets he can rally if he decides he wants revenge. More compelling, and certainly more useful, would be to depict American soldiers, who more often have the power advantage, or even some other powerful figure, being able to forgive slights against them to avoid unnecessary conflict. This is especially true if we sincerely want the struggles and sacrifice of our troops to foster peace and stability instead of causing yet more cycles of violence. Also worth mentioning is that while the introduction mentions scientists, civic leaders, and environmental visionaries, the example anecdotes focus on military experiences. The one exception is a cancer research doctor whose perseverance results in a Nobel Prize. This risks implying that while other examples of heroism exist, only the military or very great civilian ones are worth learning from. The word choice is also very particular. Leaders and visionaries, but not activists and revolutionaries. This is supported by the assertion for integrity. Every decision I make and every action I take will be moral, legal, and ethical. But this clouds and ignores the fact that most progress in American society, from racial equality and suffrage to the rights of children and workers to education and safe working conditions, is the result of actions that were deemed at the time illegal and unethical. One has a moral responsibility, Dr. Martin Luther King asserted, to disobey unjust laws. The United States themselves are the result of a revolutionary war. With this in mind, we could include, for example, the 4 Black American university students who on February 1st, 1960, sat in a whites-only lunch counter where they had been refused service. Their actions, though non-military, were courageous, humble, hopeful, and held to an integrity higher than that of the laws of the time. And while their actions did not earn them a Nobel Prize, they contributed to a movement that would change our nation. Finally, there is one critical addition necessary to make any hero code truly applicable to the true everyday person. Failure. Perseverance encourages us to carry on despite the odds, but sometimes we ourselves fall short. Not because of insurmountable obstacles or opposition, but because we, as humans, are weak and fallible. We are sometimes petty or selfish. We give in to exhaustion or fear or desire for temporary pleasures. We are unnecessarily mean or cruel. It is important then to remember and to remind each other and to accept being reminded that despite these failures, we are, each of us, children of God or Allah or the universe or whatever power each person believes animates the atoms of our matter and set into motion the stars and heavens. As such, we are, even in our weakest and most shameful moments, instruments of that power and whatever may be its purpose. We could name this 11th virtue grace or mercy or simply humanity. The anecdote could be any one of our life stories. And our assertion might be, I will remember, even in my failures, that I am a child of the universe, born of its love. There is nothing I can do to earn or to lose that love, and I will strive to share that love with all beings everywhere I go to the utmost of my ability. Amen.
What a beautiful and thought-provoking piece on heroism by Nestor Walters, everybody. Lucky to have him as a guest today. Thank you so much for joining us, Nestor. And we are also lucky to have another profile subject here with us today, Justin Price, who is one of the founders of Veterans in Need, a project that he's going to tell you a little bit more about right now. Give it up for Justin, everybody. Thanks for joining us.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you for having me. Not sure how you even found me. We're a pretty new organization. We were founded in 2021. Really, it should be my son who's up here talking about this more than me. It was a high school project 4 years ago during COVID, and they were tasked with trying to find a need in the community. And as the son of a veteran, I served, he just wanted to do something nice for everybody in the community, and so did his friends. So they put the project together, and it did well enough at their school that they got a little bit of money from the school in a small grant, like $50. And they were like, well, what are we going to do with this? Well, they decided to purchase haircuts for veterans. They went down to the local barber, and they cut a deal with him that he'd do $5 cuts for veterans for the day. And we advertised it, and they put it out there and made some flyers and stuff. Well, at the end of the day, the barber wouldn't take their money, and they'd had more donations given to them. So now they had $100, and they were very confused high school students who primarily did all of this through Zoom because they hadn't even really met each other before because it was COVID, and they were working online on this. So I'm listening to all of this out of my ear one evening as they're discussing what to try to do next. And I said, all right, guys, is this something that you feel is a good thing that you want to do more with? Or is this a high school project like most students would be like, let's wash our hands of this? Because you can take your $100 and you can give it to the American Legion in town or the VFW, and they'll be very happy with that donation. And you guys can get your grade and move on in life. Well, 2 out of the 4 said, yeah, that sounds good. We're done with this. I don't need any more. And my son and one other student said, well, what do you mean by taking this further? I said, you can incorporate. You can make this a nonprofit, and you can continue to do good things for your community and help more veterans. And so those two started to work with me. We did the paperwork to incorporate with Arizona in September of 2001, I think. So after the semester and through the summer. And then we found out how much money it takes to do good things for people. Because you got to pay the corporation commission, you got to pay the IRS. Everybody wants their piece of the pie. So we didn't become a full nonprofit for about a year and a half because we just didn't have enough money to pay the government to become legitimate. Kind of an interesting little side note there. But, you know, we continued to do little events. We started buying trinkets and flags off Amazon and selling them for $1 a piece at the 4th of July. And our coffers slowly grew. And then we started to apply for some grants. And we continued to grow. And last year, what we really do now with these monies, we do micro grants for veterans. We're an immediate hand up. If you reach out to me and you're like, I need a tank of gas to get to work, I said, okay, what's your closest gas station? If you need diapers or formula for your kids, we're there to help. We'll get you a gift card to Walmart right now. I mean, there's so many electronic gift cards that I can ship out to a veteran in short order. It's not even funny. And we remove the red tape. You know, I'll talk to you for a little bit over the phone. Those of you who are veterans in the house, we know each other in just a couple of minutes. I'll ask you where you served, what you did, things like that. Maybe every once in a while we get fooled by somebody, but I'm willing to take that risk because we also know as veterans how hard it is to ask for help. We are generally pretty far down when we will finally reach out to someone and say, I need a hand. And so a lot of the veterans that we help need more than just a quick Walmart gift card and things like that. I've got a list of resources in a Google document, and where do you live? And then I'll Google and find out who your VSO is to help you apply for benefits, and other local organizations that can help you even more if the need is larger than what we can do. But that's really how we serve back. We're a small board. I've got a Navy veteran, another Army veteran on with myself. A lot of times because of that lack of red tape, I've paid water bills and electric bills in under an hour from when the veteran reaches out, and I've kept it on for them that day because by the time they call me, a lot of times they said, well, the water company is on the way right now and I'm not going to have water when my kids get home from school. And that's pretty powerful to be able to act that fast and fill a need that quickly. Nobody's really mentioned the 22 a day that we know are out there that we lose. But by acting quickly and just letting them know somebody cares, we feel that we're definitely helping to try to put an impact on that number and lower that on a daily basis out there. So I got nothing to sell. But if you're interested in the Veterans in Need Project, I do have a couple of business cards with me today. When you see me floating around, you can find us online and on Facebook. We always just ask for those follows. That way, when we're doing stuff, more people know about it. And the more the merrier when we do our fundraisers. We're just looking for people to help. So thank you so much for having us here tonight or having me here today. I really appreciate it.
That's Justin Price and his son Grayson, one-stop shop for veterans, immediate help. Thank you so much for being a part of our community, Justin. Let's give it up for him one more time. Amazing. I'm looking for my editors. Surely they're still here. I don't see any of them, so it sounds like I'm going to read this poem. We wanted to share this one with you. It happens to be a favorite of one of the only authors we have left who's reading today. So I wanted to kind of use this as an introduction to him. This is a poem by an author who couldn't be here. She lives on the East Coast. Her name is Donna J Gelatois Lee. It's called First Marines In. Onto the channel, onto the charred rubble of land as far as you could see. Heaven, earth, the bones of Nagasaki. We were there to claim a foothold. We were the living among death in a wasteland with only stars for light. That's First Marines In. And with that, thank you. Didn't bring a printout, couldn't even read those words in 12-point font. That's how old I am now. Next up, one of my favorite writers. He's a fiction writer all the way from LA, Brian O'Hare. He's going to be reading an excerpt from his new novel called A Gathering of Vultures, which we were lucky enough to publish in Issued this year. Brian O'Hare is a graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy, former Marine Corps officer, and Gulf War veteran. His short story collection, Surrender, was the 2021 winner of the Syracuse University Press Veterans Writing Award. Give it up for Mr. Brian O'Hare.
I don't need this thing. I'm so thrilled to be here. What can I say?
Oh, they're streaming it, sorry.
I was just going to use my Marine Corps voice. Exactly right. No, exactly. This is sort of against my religion. Anyway, like I said, I am absolutely thrilled to be here. Got one of my very best friends in the entire universe right here, Sparky Renforth, classmate, fellow Marine. Known Sparky now for, I don't know, 65, 70 years. And his friend Tim, who I've just met today, who's got some amazing tattoos. So thank you very much, Tim, for coming out. Thank you, RD, and I love Issued. Thank you, guys, Lexi, Sophia, everybody. Thank you so much. As RD said, I'm going to read an excerpt from a forthcoming novel, A Gathering of Vultures, which is a very loose retelling of the Iliad, the story of the Iliad through the lens of an Air Force drone pilot, basically, more properly, a remotely piloted aircraft. Actually, Sparky, it was interesting. You and I had a conversation about this at your change of command ceremony a long time ago. And actually, your reaction to it was a big part of why I'm pursuing this. I'll talk about that later. Yeah, absolutely. Sparky's reaction, shall we say, was pretty intense, but it was great. It was proper, but it was what I think is interesting about this world. A Gathering of Vultures. The GCS filled with bodies, Colonel Puffer, Captains Akintoye and Hussein, a general I didn't recognize, a female colonel, a briefcase, all business. The general's aide, I supposed. Someone from JAG, lawyers, lots of lawyers. This was going to be legal all the way. A couple of guys in golf shirts and khakis, Oakley sunglasses on the backs of heads, who said nothing. Everybody wanted to be there when it happened. Rubberneckers, looky-loos, the morbidly curious. What was it like watching a family die? Stick around. Stale coffee, deodorant, smoked cigarettes. The GCS smelled of anticipation, as if waiting for Neil Armstrong to bounce onto the moon, his one small step speech, the world's biggest gangbang maybe. Take your pick. Golf voices again on radio, handsets cued acknowledgement, electronic chirps and tweets like songbirds or maybe vultures calling across the ether. Kometz's dry erase marker squeaked across whiteboard, a to-do list of tragedy, a throat cleared. Radio traffic became its own performance, a little-known subgenre of the oral storytelling tradition, and though separated by oceans, entire continents, billions of people were close. American technology, as close as around a campfire. We smelled the smoke, felt the flames, the heat. No money was spared. And whatever story was told, democracy, freedom, revenge, the hero was always the same. The villain, though showing similarities with villains past, is dictated by our nightmares. And though it's heresy to admit, he's beloved, for without him, and it's always a him, there is no story, no hero without a villain. Just Cause, the lawyers might title it, a ritual poetry, almost Protestant in its restraint, yet almost Catholic, with an almost Catholic twist, absolution before the sin, confession in reverse. And though always dispassionate, I heard great passion in our words, blood between the lines. As the old man always said, it's the ones who speak quietly or not at all that were the most dangerous. As if drawn to the warmth of her pregnant belly, that sun radiating brilliant life, The girl ran into her mother's arms, tiny head reared in laughter, goats nibbling at their feet. Not for the first time, I felt the shame of the voyeur, the violation in witnessing uninvited such intimacy, the shame of the human body, its vulnerability. The armed men appeared again, shooing mother and daughter from their home. Intruders, all of us. Voices notched an octave, as if afraid of being left behind, missing out somehow, chatter hitting in 2- and 3-word bursts, excited yet always disciplined, a testament to their training and culture. These were the descendants of the island that invented time itself, a way to coordinate ships, control an empire. And we were clever students, the prudent and deserving keepers of that legacy, the American taxpayer always getting their money's worth. I listened as hidden storytellers, the JTAC, the SEAL team commander, and the three-letter agencies who whispered in our ears, confirming this or directing that, discussed how the story ends, the many variations, yet always with the target returning to dust. As I listened, the screen erupted in light, sky smudged black in smoke, different from that of the campfire, tinged now with hazard, the chemical and catalytic agents tasting of science, making eyes tear and breathing impossible, the smell of death. The ancient cloud hung in the air, cedars splintered, trunks black in flame. The living ran to help, do what they could, if only to cry out, powerless before such power. And as I watched, I'm aware only of a steady ticking in my veins, my heart pumping blood, and the desire to flee. The vision repeated. I watched from an infinity of angles, zooming in on minute details, the resolution of the Reaper's camera, truly extraordinary, the quote, robust suite of visual sensors, a bona fide marvel of American technology. We lived in marvelous times. I watched mother and daughter taking note of their hands they held to one another, as if afraid to let go. I'd always been fascinated by hands, their ability to express intelligence and emotion, things inexpressible, their undeniable grace. I may be odd, but hands are sexy. I zoomed to each face moments before the flash, and in their frozen laughter, their every word, I discovered not only goodbye, but the infinite variations of I love you. The screen blew out, and again, our love of death masqueraded as love itself. And again, the girl, the goats, the mother. The armed men disappeared into the dark of the house. The radio chatter voices rigid with hunting dog tension, a very real lust ticking inside, the decision made. Hail Mary, clear to fire. But the missiles, both of them, remained detached. Hail Mary, clear to fire. The voice betrayed irritation, but SEALs were always irritated. I continued my orbit, continued watching the life below, the lives being lived. Fire, Hail Mary. No mere irritation now. Hot Rod 26 would employ one of the many submission techniques he'd mastered against me if he could. A Muay Thai shin kick prodding me into action. A visit from the motivation police, as one of the SEALs put it after a night of drinking. A sense of urgency imparted. And yet, there was no Muay Thai kick. Hot Rod 26 was 7,000 very real miles away. But behind me, I heard movement, a shift of feet in energy, a sea change. There's a pause before what happened next, a space occupied by what I'll call disbelief, followed almost immediately by fear that what's happened to me could happen to them, that it's contagious like a virus. To banish this fear, Colonel Puffer stepped forward as if I'd simply forgotten and said, "Fire, Grace." A hint of embarrassment in his voice, an apology almost. After all, there was a general officer present, someone he aspired to be, the unsmiling men in golf shirts and Oakleys. When I didn't fire, Puffer shifted into fear, also known as "this is really happening," grabbing for the joystick to fire the missiles and to accomplish the mission, the execution of these very bad men. The job we'd trained for, are paid to do, one that we are strangely in agreement on. Bad men die bad. It's true. Yet, I refuse to give up control. It's my aircraft. I made the decisions. As the GCS erupted into noise and movement, I fixated on the mother and her pregnant belly, that sun radiating brilliant life. The duality, she's the duality, I explained to them. The general, the men in golf shirts and the Oakleys, even Puffer, that was merely a functional character and functioning as advertised. God, she's God. But they don't listen, insisting on struggling with me as if deaf. Puffer called to Akintoye and Hussein, their own disbelief paralyzing them, fear making their coffee go cold, for help wresting the joystick from my hands. I hugged the stick, yelling for them to look, absorbing their fists, protecting it, eyes locked on mother and daughter. Kometz chattered into his mic, eyes flares, as if chained to his post, reminding me of something my father said of the North Vietnamese SAM sites as he roared overhead. Said he could see them chained to their guns. It's odd that I remembered that, especially now, but it's a good story, a testament to my father's unique sense of truth, his ability to make lies come true. The video feed spun. I lost sight of mother and daughter. I'm pulled from my chair. Akintoye held me in his powerful arms, his Division III All-American second team offensive lineman's bulk. But he's surprisingly gentle, tender even, as if a favorite uncle has had a seizure, an episode of some kind, and he's unsure what to do, afraid he'll hurt me. And while Puffer fought to recover the aircraft, his career on the line, Kometz absorbed my betrayal with a smile, as if impressed, or at the very least I'd entertained him, a story being retold even now in his mind over happy hour Jack and Cokes. I smiled back. Akintoye is on top of me now, his full weight, maybe 230, 240, though he's been trying to lose weight, skipping lunch, jogging with Hussein instead. But still, he's a big guy, and he's pleading, it's okay, please, sir. One swat from his paw and I'm done. Didn't he know that? I'm moved by his purity, I'll call it, that he still believed. And while Akintoye righted the world, as if such a thing was still possible, I saw Aguilar, or what the mushrooms told me was Aguilar. It didn't matter. The full force of her eyes on me, gold and shining. She placed a hand on my brow and I went still. Pilotless, the Reaper dizzied into the hills, the feed registering treetop, then ground, then darkness, vaguely familiar shapes, trunks, boulder, sunlight, as if a final glimpse before tumbling down an endless hole, and then black. The girl, her unborn sibling, their mother, they heard nothing. Distant thunder, maybe. So that's... And I've got these books over here, people. I need it for bus fare back to LA, so please. Anyway, thank you very much.
Surrender is a phenomenal, award-winning collection of short stories, so I do encourage everybody to grab a copy before they leave today. I'm going to close us out with a poem that I hope I can actually see on the page. This one is by Morrow Dowdle, and it is called When I Left the Military. They gave me a painted statue, foot tall, a faceless woman with her hair gathered in a low bun, wearing a long-sleeved, floor-length white gown. A wingless angel, maybe. She clasps in her arms an American flag folded in a formal triangle. That was how I felt at times in that place. Small and wooden, one person carrying an entire country. We have so many amazing poets and fiction writers in this issue who could not be here with us tonight because they live across the country. So I just want to give a quick shout out to all of them because some of them might be watching on the live stream. We could not have this journal without your contributions. The same goes for our amazing profile subjects. Mental Joe is another company that we profiled, Milltree out in 29 Palms, as well as the Veterans Imagination Project and Veterans in Need. Thank you to all of our authors. Thank you to all of our amazing veterans who are doing service in their communities and keeping veterans safe, and healthy, and imagining a better future. Finally, thank you to our supporters, Azura Vets Coalition. Thanks so much for hosting us this year. What a beautiful space. We are so honored to be here. Thank you so much. Of course, a huge thanks to the Office for Veteran and Military Academic Engagement, who put up with all my literary BS throughout the year. I love this gig so much, and I could not do this work without the support of Colonel Wanda Wright. Everybody give it up for Wanda Wright, please. She is the director of the Office for Veteran and Military Academic Engagement at ASU. And where did Stacy Eastwood go? She is the director of everything in that office that Wanda doesn't direct. So please give it up for Stacy Eastwood. Thank you, everybody, for coming today to support veterans' stories, to support veterans' mental health, and to support all these initiatives. We're just hoping that in Issued, we're kind of housing all those initiatives in one place. So grab a copy before you leave, support the authors, support the nonprofits, and keep your communities safe and healthy, everybody. Thank you so much.